Look at the highway, a line of slow, polluting, metal boxes, a technological solution from a century ago. Now, look at the desert. In this unforgiving landscape, there is a scar in the earth, a 20-mile-long concrete beam that seems to defy logic. This is the abandoned track for a machine that promised to change everything. This is the grave of the Hovertrain. The Hovertrain was the ultimate answer to congestion, a sleek, elegant machine that rode on a cushion of air and magnetic force, promising speeds up to 300 miles per hour with zero friction. It was a $3 billion endeavor backed by the highest levels of government. This was not a failure of engineering, but a deliberate act of sabotage and economic murder. They sold the public a dream of speed and silence, but they buried the truth. The Hovertrain, in its catastrophic failure, inadvertently stumbled upon a revolutionary, world-changing technology, a braking system that was so effective, so powerful, that its blueprints were immediately classified and remain hidden to this day. Watch this video to the end, and you will learn the exact, chilling technical name of this secret braking system that forced the project's closure. The concept was revolutionary. Use powerful electromagnets to lift the train millimeters above a concrete track, eliminating all physical friction. They had solved the problem of speed, but the engineers forgot one thing. The track is part of the train. A slight, undetectable flaw in the concrete would lead to a catastrophic, literal decapitation of the entire project. We know the official story. The track was too expensive to build, but the truth is darker. To understand why they buried this technology, we must first look into the political conspiracy that began in the construction unions and ended with a secret, deliberate explosion on the testing track. The Hovertrain was born from the competition for supremacy in speed. In the 1960s, the US realized its rail infrastructure was obsolete compared to Japan's Shinkansen. The goal was to leapfrog traditional rail entirely, going straight to the zero-friction future. The lead scientist, Dr. Robert Goodman, was obsessed with the purity of motion. He argued that the only way to achieve 300 miles per hour, 500 kilometers per hour, safely was to remove the wheel entirely. His team settled on the air cushion vehicle, ACV, design, a jet engine pushing the vehicle forward, while massive fans underneath created the levitating cushion of air. The initial prototypes, tested on short segments of prefabricated track, were phenomenal. They were fast, quiet, and offered a ride of unparalleled smoothness. The public loved the idea, viewing it as the ultimate expression of American technological superiority. The fatal flaw was built into the track. The initial cost estimates for laying the 20-mile experimental track were already enormous. Goodman's team argued that the track needed to be preternaturally smooth and perfectly level. Deviations of even a few millimeters could lead to catastrophic instability at high speeds. This meant using specialized, aerospace-grade concrete, poured in vast, uninterrupted segments. The engineers solved the levitation problem, but the political machine was about to destroy the project. The first sign of the inevitable betrayal came when the construction contracts for the critical 20-mile test track were mysteriously awarded not to aerospace concrete specialists, but to a cheap, politically connected construction union with a history of cutting corners. The construction of the test track was a monument to compromise. The politically connected contractor ignored the strict material specifications. Instead of the aerospace-grade concrete necessary for temperature stability, they used cheaper, readily available materials. The fatal physics occurred not during the day, but at night. The high thermal expansion and contraction of the cheap concrete caused imperceptible micro-warping in the track surface overnight. These deviations were mere millimeters, invisible to the human eye, but catastrophic to the cushion of air beneath the Hovertrain. During the critical 300 miles per hour tests, the train experienced violent, terrifying oscillations. The air cushion, instead of providing uniform support, began to bleed out at the points of track warpage. The train would momentarily lose levitation and scrape the concrete at enormous speed, throwing sparks and vibrating violently. This wasn't a stable cushion. It was a deadly, bouncing dance. Dr. Goodman's team was horrified. The data proved the track was unsafe. The military which had invested heavily in the Hovertrain's potential to rapidly deploy troops, demanded a solution. The desperation to save the project led them to a secret, final test. They loaded the Hovertrain with an unstable, untested magnetic braking system, hoping it could compensate for the track flaws. This final, desperate measure unlocked the secret technology that would ultimately force the government to bury the entire project. The final collapse was not a spectacular crash, it was a slow, deliberate strangulation. Once the instability was proven, the funding was cut, but the politically connected contractors successfully sued the government for breach of contract. Despite their faulty work, the government was forced to pay the full cost of the faulty construction plus penalties. This single legal disaster ballooned the project's cost to the final $3 billion. The political masters, desperate to hide the scale of the financial and engineering failure, made a unilateral decision: stop the project, destroy all evidence, and hide the existence of the flawed track. The colossal test track was deemed too expensive to demolish. Instead, the government ordered it to be covered with dirt, buried, and forgotten, literally turning the most ambitious transport project into the world's most expensive piece of hidden junk. The Hovertrain was successfully hidden from public memory, but the final, salvaged magnetic braking system, the electrodynamic dampener, remained in Dr. Goodman's lab. This device was capable of stopping a 300 miles per hour vehicle almost instantaneously, generating an unprecedented energy pulse. When the military realized the potential weaponization of this braking technology, they took an extreme measure. The Hovertrain failed as a transport solution, but it inadvertently created two massive legacies. The first was a financial warning. The project directly led to reforms in government contracting transparency and the creation of independent oversight boards for infrastructure projects. Never again would politically connected contractors be allowed to sabotage a project of this scale with impunity. The second, and most important, legacy is the electrodynamic dampener, EDD. When the military discovered that the EDD could generate an enormous, controllable electromagnetic pulse, EMP, during its braking sequence, they realized its potential was far greater than simply stopping a train. This became a classified technology, stripped from the Hovertrain project and perfected as an experimental weapon system. We've seen the dream, the compromise, and the catastrophic collapse of the Hovertrain, but the most intriguing part of the story is the machine's afterlife, the secret life of its buried track and the true, chilling nature of the EDD technology, the revolutionary braking system that was weaponized by the state. The abandonment of the Hovertrain project was not merely a cancellation, it was a vast, coordinated effort to erase a $3 billion mistake from existence. The government could not risk the public seeing the faulty track, which stood as a testament to political corruption and engineering hubris. The order was issued to bury the 20-mile track entirely. Massive earth-moving equipment was brought in under cover of darkness. The perfectly formed concrete guide beam, designed to cradle the Hovertrain at 300 miles per hour, was slowly covered with tons of sand and desert soil, turning the sophisticated infrastructure into a subtle, 20-mile-long burial mound. This act of concealment served two purposes. It hid the government's shame and provided a massive, permanent liability. The problem was that the track wasn't just concrete, it was an ongoing, environmental hazard. The chemical grout used during the early stabilization phases, along with various untested magnetic compounds, slowly began to leach into the desert water table. The government solved the political problem by creating a long-term ecological one. Furthermore, the buried concrete beam itself became a bizarre, uncharted geological feature, prone to unpredictable shifting and causing intermittent structural problems for anything built near or over it for decades to come. The world was told the project was dead and buried, but the test pilots who risked their lives on the unstable track knew the truth. The buried track wasn't silent. Years after its official closure, sensitive seismic monitoring stations began picking up faint, strange vibrational signatures from beneath the desert sand, signatures that suggested the buried track was still, somehow, actively moving, almost breathing. the true afterlife of the Hovertrain began in a different, highly classified lab with the electrodynamic dampener, EDD. This braking system was a stroke of genius. It worked by forcing the Hovertrain's powerful levitation electromagnets to instantly reverse polarity and generate a massive, controllable electrical resistance field against the track. This could stop a 300 miles per hour train in seconds without physical friction. The military intelligence saw a completely different application. When the EDD engaged, the forced magnetic field reversal created a potent, localized electromagnetic pulse, EMP, an energy wave capable of frying unshielded electronic equipment over a large area. This wasn't a defensive system, it was a potent offensive weapon. The braking technology was immediately severed from the doomed transport project and classified under a separate black budget. Dr. Goodman and his team, though disillusioned by the failure of the transport dream, were forced to develop the EDD into a portable, dedicated weapon system. This system was designed to be carried by high-altitude aircraft, capable of deploying a controlled EMP blast over a target zone without the destructive force of a nuclear detonation. The government had found its hidden billion-dollar prize, a silent, non-lethal, yet system-crippling, weapon, but the power of the EDD was too immense to control perfectly. During a high-altitude test, a miscalculation in the EMP's trajectory caused a catastrophic side effect, temporarily disabling a major civilian communications satellite. A mistake that almost triggered an international incident. The failure of the EDD as a weapon system brought the project full circle back to the problem of human error and control. The magnetic braking system, when deployed from the air, proved too volatile and unpredictable to be a reliable weapon. The system was deemed too powerful for human hands. The civilian engineers had envisioned a machine for public service. The military saw only a tool for dominance. The final report concluded that while the technology was feasible, the financial and human cost of achieving 100% reliability made it impractical. The project was officially marked as mission accomplished, technology transferred, which was military doublespeak for project cancelled, ethical fire hazard. Before the complete project files were incinerated, Dr. Goodman secretly copied and encrypted one single data tape. This tape contained the pure, uncorrupted data from the high-speed thermal and vibrational analysis of the cheap concrete track, the true engineering flaw that led to the initial instability. This data, decades later, would become the key to a completely new form of high-speed transport. Dr. Goodman hid the data tape in a seemingly innocuous location within the decommissioned laboratory. He knew the truth about the structural failure was more valuable than the EMP weapon they created. That data would eventually fall into the hands of a new generation of engineers who would use the lessons of the $3 billion Hovertrain to successfully launch the most ambitious transport system of the 21st century. The deepest irony of the Hovertrain's failure is its direct link to the modern Hyperloop concept. The principles are eerily similar. Eliminate physical friction to achieve extreme speed. The difference is that Hyperloop uses a vacuum tube, eliminating the greatest enemy of the Hovertrain, air resistance and external friction. The success of the Hyperloop is built directly on the negative lessons of the buried track. Modern engineers, having studied the vague, declassified reports of the Hovertrain disaster, knew two things: the track must be perfect, and air resistance must be removed. The Hyperloop solves both by placing the track in a controlled, low-pressure environment. Furthermore, the raw data from Dr. Goodman's hidden tape, the analysis of the cheap, faulty concrete, provided crucial insights into material tolerance and thermal warping. The failure of the Hovertrain became the uncredited blueprint for the success of Hyperloop's infrastructure integrity protocols. The Hovertrain was successfully buried, but the money trail was not. The final bizarre act of the project's closure involved the government secretly selling the rights to the buried concrete track to a foreign entity for a symbolic $1, a sale which contained a dark, long-term liability that the purchasing nation completely failed to understand. The ultimate failure of the Hovertrain wasn't just technical or financial, it was environmental. the buried track and the chemical grout continue to pose an ecological problem. The $3 billion spent created not a solution, but a permanent, costly scar on the landscape, a warning about the hidden costs of reckless infrastructure. The story of the buried track asks a profound question about the future of transportation, given the environmental and financial risks of massive infrastructure projects. Should future ambitious transit ideas, like Hyperloop, be funded privately, shielded from political corruption, or should the failure of the Hovertrain force governments to abandon such megaprojects entirely? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one. The Hovertrain was never built. We'll see you next time as we dive deep into another lost future.